The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, a sunny Thursday here in Southern California. I have a co-host today for this podcast, just because he's in town. Chuck Klosterman, he was on here yesterday, he's on here again today. And
I exist.
And we are about to call on the Subway Fresh Tech hotline. Oh, he's on the line from TNT. One of the 25 greatest basketball players of all time, Mr. Charles Barkley. What's happening?
Man, everything's good, man. We, got two really good series going and winding down, so I can't complain.
Is this the best playoffs since this is a sore subject to bring up? But I thought the 93 playoffs, the Final Four in 93, was my favorite Final Four until this Final Four. I love this Final Four. What do you think?
Well, that one wasn't good for me.
Well, I know. That's why I hesitated to bring it up.
This playoffs, it's been very exciting. But, Billy, what it proves is sports are about young guys, man. You look at the great Tim Duncan, who's the greatest power forward ever. And, Gasol and Zach just had their way with him. Look at Derek Fisher, who's been a terrific player. You look at how Chris Paul went around him. And then you look at the Lakers, how, they just got non-athletic ability real quick, playing all those years, caught up with that team.
And didn't you mention the Celtics?
Oh, the Celtics is another example. But it just shows you, man, sports are about young guys. I felt bad watching Shaq try to run up and down the court. And I hope somebody get to him and say, hey, man, it's time to pack it in.
Right.
That's interesting, Charles. As a player, when you start to age and you start to feel things kind of disappearing, what's the first physical aspect that starts to disappear? Like, when did you sense that you were aging as a player?
Recovery time. You can't recover as quickly. Like, if you get tired or have a great game, it probably takes you a couple days to get your energy level back, and it only gets worse. That's probably it, and then those nagging injuries just keep nagging. Look at Shaq, who's probably one of the greatest physical specimens in the history of basketball. You look at guys like Greg Oden and Bill Walton, who didn't weigh near as much as Shaq, who can't stay healthy. And for Shaq, as big as he is, and Shaq is the only guy in NBA history, for me, who I ever said, man, that's a big dude. But, you can't recover. But the thing also, those little nagging injuries just keep nagging you, and you don't get healthy.
And another thing you mentioned during the playoffs, Garnett, who used to be, one of the most magnificent athletes in the league, in that Miami series, once he started doing those up fakes around the rim, you noticed that right away. You said, uh-oh, that's one of the old man signs. Instead of you're not going up and dunking, you're doing the up fakes, you're in trouble.
Well, that's one sign, but the other sign is like when he had the monster, he had a flashback and had 20 and 15.
Yeah, 28 and 18. Yeah,
and then the next game he had 1 for 10. That's what I was telling you. That's what I was telling you a few seconds ago. When you can't recover, like it used to be, no big deal to play back-to-back games. And Kevin Garnett has been one of the best athletes in NBA history. But when you get old, when you have a monster game, you can't recover. And he came back and went 1 for 10 that next game. That's when Father Time is creeping on your neck.
Did you see that happen with Kobe this year? Because I kind of felt like he was another guy that I just didn't feel like was that consistency.
Kobe's on the downside. I noticed it last year. And everybody says, what are you talking about? I said, dude, I know what I'm looking for. Kobe's coming down. Listen, I can promise you two things. It's two things that are undefeated. Those Las Vegas casinos and Father Time. they both always gonna win in the long run.
What about Dirk Nowitzki though? Because you would think he's almost at the point where it should be happening for him, and yet he's as good as he's ever been.
Well, there's two things. Number one, I think Dirk is only 30. And also, he's a finesse player. He hasn't been going in there dunking and all that other stuff. He's probably going to be able to extend it a couple of years because of his game. Dirk ain't really taking a beating. People give him a hard time, which is stupid. And they talk about he's soft. He's not soft. He's just a finesse player. The guy, why in the world, just because you're 7 feet tall, why do you have to go in there and get the hell beat out of you? I mean, he's a great jump shooter. There's two guys in this league that are unguardable, Carmelo Anthony and Dirk. Durant is a little bit different because he shoots jumpers. If you notice the difference between those two guys and Kevin is, little guys can guard Kevin because he still gets everything off the dribble. Right. He adds that post-up game to his game. Tony Allen won't be able to guard him. That's the difference between Carmelo and Dirk. They post up more. But Dirk, he hasn't taken a beating. He's still, his jump shot's not going anywhere. And that's the difference.
Charles, I want to ask you a question about Joel Anthony of the Heat. I feel when he's on the floor, he actually makes them a much better team, despite the fact that he has no offensive game whatsoever, and that causes some problems because then Noah can kind of play free safety. But I'm curious, when you're on the floor with a guy, what would make you less comfortable? Having a guy on your team who has no offensive game whatsoever, or somebody who can't stop anyone defensively? What's a bigger liability among one-dimensional players? A guy who can't guard or a guy who can't score?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on the Joel Anthony thing, because I think you saw in a game last night the difference when they have a guy in there who can score. When Anthony's out there, you see they don't honor the pick and roll. It really hurts LeBron and Dwayne when they run pick and rolls with the center because they know they're not going to throw him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as you saw last night, the difference when you have another big guy out there, you can run the pick and roll or the pick and pop. Haslam is a great pick and pop guy. Anthony's out there working hard, and sometimes he can help you. He can't help them this series because he can't just outwork guys because he's not going to outwork Joakim Noah. Nobody works harder than Noah. Right. But last night was a perfect example of, wow, if you put a guy out there who can score with LeBron and Dwayne, they can give him the pick and pop or the pick and roll. So that's the big difference. That's why they need Haslam to play well if they're going to win this series.
I was going to say, Haslam changed that series in the second quarter. I went from thinking there's no way Miami could basically handle that 6 feet in front of the paint the way Chicago could to thinking, wow, this is a guy that really might have flipped this series. Did he flip the series, or was it just one good game?
He did not flip the series yet because he's got to play like that 3 more times. See, the best team always wins a 7-game series because you can have a fluke game here, you can have a fluke game there. But to beat a team 4 times, you're going to have to outplay them. What he really did more than anything last night was even up the benches. Derrick Rose did not have a good game. LeBron had a good game, played terrific. But I thought the difference in the series would be the bench. And it was in game 1. But Haslam controlling the bench, making the bench an even matchup, that was the difference in the game. And he's going to have to play like that 3 more times because the Bulls have a much more consistent bench. The Heat bench has been a liability all season. I think the best thing in the world for Haslam is he get a bunch of days off right now. But what's going to be interesting is how he's going to recover when those games come in one day after the other. That's going to be the big test. He played great. He said it last night. I'm exhausted. But he gets a couple days off because the next game is not till Sunday. But because the Bulls, man, they play at max effort all the time. Can he do that 3 more times when them games start going every other day? That's going to be very interesting with the Heat's bench and with Haslam.
Tell me about when you were in Phoenix in '93 and you guys had that great season. You made the finals. Everything went perfect. Then the next year you come back, you got the bullseye on you. and you wore down, and you basically blew that series to Houston. I thought you guys had a better team. Miami's had that bullseye on them pretty much since they had the party in July. Is there a chance they're going to wear down before the last game of the finals here, mentally?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to wear down at this part of time. I mean, they got 2 of the 5 probably best players in the world. They're going to play their game. You know, I think the Bulls probably have a better team top to bottom. But when you have 2 guys that good, you're going to always have a chance. And if they get like Gibson in game 1, and if you put Haslam in game 2, you know, some of the bench, I think they're going to dictate it. Because the Bulls starters got to play better. Derrick Rose just couldn't make a shot last night. But the difference in the game was Haslam. So it's all about who's going to surprise you. There's going to be a surprise player every game because the stars going to play well. They're going to have LeBron didn't play great in game 1, and Rose didn't play great in game 2, but the bench dictated the game. So it's going to be a compelling series. I think this is a long series. It's great defense if you like great defense, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Hey, Charles, this is a slight change of subject, but this morning I was reading about a radio interview you had recently given where you discussed how when you were in the league, it wasn't that, you might have played with guys on your team who were gay. You knew they were gay. And it was very interesting, your comments about this. And I was wondering, when you say that they were gay, you just knew this. In the culture of the NBA, is that more open than we realize? Like, how did you know this, or was this just something that everyone on the team was aware of because of your interactions with these individuals?
I think anybody who's ever been on a team or been in a work environment, you guys included, have worked with a gay person.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's absurd to think that, I haven't ever played with a gay guy or been around or working with a gay guy.
So is this something you were assuming, or is this something that you knew?
Let me tell you something. I don't think people assume people are gay.
Mm-hmm.
I think you really know when a person's gay because that's not a conversation.
How do you know?
I think their interaction with people, who they hang out with, where they hang out at, because I think everybody knows certain parts of town or areas are a certain way. I think their interaction with you as a teammate, you're like, wow, that's weird. Not weird, just different.
Mm-hmm,
but, it bothers me. I've been blasting ESPN, and not really blasting. It annoys me that they try to act like all us jocks are going to be homophobic and a guy can't come out in the locker room. First of all, I think it does a disservice to team sports to say we would not like a gay guy.
Right.
Listen, man, it doesn't work like that in sports. It does not work like that, where you say, hey, I don't want to play with a gay guy. Like, they're assuming that he's going to try to make a move on the other players and things like that, which is absurd. I got plenty of gay friends. The notion that they going to be trying to make moves on us all the time is ridiculous.
Well, then why haven't we seen a guy come out yet? If you feel like the environment is a good environment,
that's a great question, because America is homophobic. America has always discriminated against gay people. They try to pass the buck. On to make it like, well, all the jocks are going to be offended if a guy comes out. America has always been homophobic.
So you would say the degree of homophobia in sports is similar to that of society?
I don't know the answer to that question, because no prominent jock has ever came out.
Right.
And I can tell you, we've had private conversation. I played in the NBA for 16 years about guys who we knew were gay or thought were gay. And I can tell you, we never said a bad word about the guy. And I hear these guys get on TV and say, oh, these jocks will go crazy if a guy came out. I'm like, dude, we just want guys on our team who can play. We never cared. I hear this stuff about, people talk about race in America. I can tell you, first of all, America always has had racial issues. But on team sports, I can honestly tell you, we don't care what color or religion a guy is as long as he can play. And I think some of these news organizations do jocks a disservice when they're like, oh, these guys don't want to play with gay guys. That's not true. You know who I don't want to play with? Guys who suck at their sport.
Well, let me ask you.
Sure.
It seems like the climate is ready for the right person to come out. First of all, I don't think this person will be discriminated against. Second of all, I don't want to say he'd be a hero, but I think he'd be a pioneer to some degree, and I think ultimately it would put his career in a better place, not a worse one. Do you agree?
Well, I think that it'd be interesting because, number one, you got those Bible thumpers out there. They're going to be like, they're the most judgmental people, and they shouldn't be. They're supposed to not judge other people, but clearly they do.
Yeah.
Clearly they do. I think it'll be interesting from a team standpoint as far as sponsors. There's going to be some of these groups that not going to like it. They're not going to want people advertising their product and stuff like that. So it will be very interesting. I just want people to know where I'm coming from. First of all, I'm black. I'm against any form of discrimination whatsoever. And if gay people want to get married, that's their business. I actually got a great text from one of my coworkers, and he said, listen, I think what you did, and it was somewhere, that was really cool, but I got to tell you something. It made me think, it's not my thing, but to each his own. And I sent him a text back. I said, that's all you want, bro. That's all I think any gay people want.
So what was this text referring to? He was why was he texting you? Because of what you said in the radio?
My stance on gay marriage.
Mm-hmm. Right, okay.
And he sent me a text. He says, it's not my thing, but you know what? You made me think, to each his own. And that's the point that, I probably want to get out there more than anything. First of all, I don't care. But his point was, you know what? It's not my thing, but to each his own. And I sent him a text back. I said, man, that's all gay people want.
Did you feel this way when you were 25, or did this change over time?
I think I'm a little bit different when it comes to any type of discrimination. I grew up in Alabama at the time of the church bombing and Dr. Martin Luther King. So my family has always been like in the fight. Not me personally because I was too young, but growing up in Alabama with the church bombing and all the stuff that was going on with Dr. King, my grandmother, who's the greatest influence in my life, she made a conscious effort to make sure anytime you see or hear discrimination, you stand up. You don't be no punk. You don't let your friends tell jokes like that, because if they tell an Asian joke or Jewish joke, when you're not around, they're going to tell a black joke. So my grandmother's always said, hey, listen, you don't sit back and let it go like that. And I'll never forget that. And, like I say, clearly I've had gay friends in my life. Never crossed my mind that they shouldn't get married. And the truth of the matter is, if people really want to do their homework, I don't think gay people want to get married to rub it in anybody's face. I think they want the same medical and social benefits as a man and a woman. They want their spouse or their partner to get their medical benefits and things like that. I mean, I think that's what this thing is really about. This notion that they're trying to corrupt kids and, they're trying to rub it in people's face, that's just ignorant. They just want health benefits and social benefits.
Right. Well, this is a little bit different, but when Magic got HIV and he tried to come back, it was a different form of discrimination, but it's still, maybe you couldn't even call it discrimination. It was more of an unease with some of the players. Do you know, Karl Malone, who'd been your Dream Team teammate, was one of the most vocal guys. Did you feel that whole thing?
I told Carl he was 100% wrong. First of all, we didn't at that time. Clearly, we know a lot more now.
Yeah.
The notion that I don't think we were out there going kiss Magic. You know, I don't think AIDS is spread like that. Carl was wrong at the time. I thought we in the NBA did a fantastic job of opening up, trying to bring more stuff like that to the table. But Carl was wrong at the time. But we all embraced Magic. And you know the thing that's amazing? Magic Johnson is one of my heroes. What I mean by that, I don't care about the basketball part of it. I've always said, when you're rich and famous, your job is to bring as many people along for the ride as possible. And what he's done with these Starbucks and Fat Burgers and movie theaters, helping these people get making their situation better in their life.
Yeah.
That's the greatest thing Magic Johnson has ever done. Clearly, he was a great basketball player. But when you're rich and famous, you know, a lot of these guys get caught up in buying big houses and big cars. But I always have said this. Our job, if you're lucky to hit the lottery, and that's what you hit, the lottery, to bring as many people possible along for the ride. And I don't mean freeloaders. I mean helping people become successful in life. That's what you're supposed to do. And Magic, to me, has probably done a better job than any jock ever.
Let me ask you about you, because I feel like you've had this is weird to say, but I feel like you've had a really good season. It feels like you've been on top of stuff. You've had predictions, like you called that Memphis thing. You were on the Dallas thing, all this stuff. Is it fair to say that you're in a good place with your life right now?
Well, the basketball thing is cool for me, Bill, to be honest with you. I love watching basketball. I'm not saying that I watch more basketball than anybody in the world, but nobody in the world watches more basketball than me. I love it. I love all sports. I'm a sports junkie.
Yeah.
But the thing that I really like about the playoffs are cool because I think it's a really chess match. And you have to figure out who's going to beat a team 4 out of 7 times. That's really, like, at this point, ain't no team better than the other. College is a little bit different because if VCU played Kansas 10 times, they're only going to beat them one time. But they couldn't beat Kansas in a 7-game series because Kansas guard not going to go 2 for 25 4 out of 7 times.
Right.
But the NBA is a little bit different. You can look at the matchups. You study the games. I love doing that. I do. I love doing that. Now, it doesn't work out all the time because I picked Memphis to beat Oklahoma City. But also, I'm very aware that there's a game or two in every series that dictates who wins the series. I said I think Memphis is going to beat Oklahoma City. But I said, if they don't win game 4, they're not going to win this series. Now, I'm going to say the same thing about the Miami. I picked the Bulls to win the series. Now, but if Miami win these next 2 games, they're going to win the series. The Bulls have to win one of these next 2 games in Miami because all these teams are pretty evenly matched. But I truly believe there's a game or two in every series that can flip the series. Like they were like last night, they asked LeBron to just flip the series. He says, no. The series got a long way to go. LeBron's been around long enough to know that the Bulls are good enough to win in Miami. But the Bulls have to win one of these next 2 games or they're not going to win this series.
Charles, you were just talking about loving to watch basketball, loving to think about basketball. I'm curious, how did you feel about some of the criticism you took while doing the NCAA tournament? There were some people who felt both you and Kenny simply had not watched enough college basketball or were not fluent enough with the college game to sort of serve as analysts. I'm guessing you disagreed with that, and I'm wondering how you felt about people who kind of question your ability to do that.
Well, first of all, I think some of the criticism was fair. I'm not going to watch Wofford play. They're not on TV throughout the year. I had to get tapes. The thing that was interesting about it, Bill, okay, there's 68 teams in the tournament, but you probably have to watch 80 teams to be realistic. I'm not going to watch those teams. Number one, I'm watching the NBA. A lot of those teams are not going to be on television. So,
but like on a given Monday night, are you watching the Big East, or is that only what you watch if there was no NBA?
You're watching all the big schools.
Okay.
But the big schools are easy. But Wofford, NC Asheville, teams like Montana State, Montana, South Dakota State, I'm not going to watch those teams. I don't even know what channel they would be on.
So were you nervous? Did you feel uncomfortable trying to provide analysis?
This is what I did. As the field started coming together, still it was going to be 6-8, but there was a couple of upsets. So instead of watching 80 teams, you kind of, okay, now I'm down to 75 as the tournament get closer, and you get to the championship game. So then what you do is, okay, you have like cheat sheets. You probably watch 50, 60 teams play. And you can't watch a team play once. I think you have to watch a team probably play 3 or 4 times to get a realistic impact. But what I did was I called college coaches around the country who were my friends. I called the CBS guys. Dan Bonner was terrific for me. Seth Davis was terrific. Greg Anthony, Clark Kellogg. I said, hey, man, help me out with Wofford. Help me out with UNC Asheville. Because once the tournament started, it was easy because I had seen them play again. Because you can't judge them the first time because you don't know who they're going to be matched up against. So teams don't get that. You got to figure out the matchups. So you just watching the game, watching the tape, or getting some cheat sheets from other people. But then once the tournament starts, it became easy. Because, first of all, the tournament was great because you never realized how bad it sucked watching one game and then going to the last minute of games. Because you couldn't get an indication of how the game went, but they flip you there for the last couple of minutes. But this deal is going to be great for the fans because you get to watch all the games. So it's great for the fans. But listen, I'm not going to watch all the teams play. That's fair. At least give me a chance. Once the game started, it was easy because I could just watch them and then you can judge them at that point. But the criticism, hey, man, I don't take it personally, but I'm not going to watch all those teams play. First of all those teams not on television. But a lot of the guys were great. They gave me great information and things like that. And I thought it went well. But it was the best thing for the fans because they got to watch every game. And that was the most important thing.
Hey, last question. Let's talk about Nowitzki. I think he's moved to another level. I think he needs the finals to complete it. But, if they make the finals again, at the very least, he's on that level now historically, I think, with kind of lurking around where you and Karl Malone are, maybe Dr. J, people like that. How high can he go? Is this somebody who could potentially be...
First of all, the guy's he's the greatest European player ever. He's one of the greatest NBA players ever. He's probably been the toughest matchup. Shaquille was always... Nobody could handle Shaquille. He was the most physically imposing thing I've ever seen in my life. Remember early in Michael's career, you could make him shoot jumpers.
Right.
Because he couldn't shoot the ball. He became a great shooter. Remember, you used to back off of him. Same thing with LeBron to a certain degree. You make him shoot jumpers. But, Dirk is an impossible matchup. Every time I see Dirk or some of these guys, I pull for the guys who are on the list.
Right. What does that mean?
I call it the list in every sport because I know every year in the NBA playoffs or some sport that's happening, whether it's hockey, baseball, or football, they're going to start showing the list of the greatest players to never win it.
Right.
And I always root for those guys because I'm on the list. It is what it is. I can't take it personally. It is what it is. Dirk is on the list right now.
And
Jason, Carl, John, Elgin Baylor, Patrick Ewing, we're all on that list. You know, it is what it is.
The only thing I would say with you, though, is that I thought you were really good in the 93 finals, and I almost feel like if they had played that series 10 times, I think Phoenix wins 5 of them. You know, I think the difference with you and Carl was Carl kind of came short in the 97-98 finals. He left people with the taste like, man, he didn't do enough. He didn't come through. You don't feel like people feel that way about you in 93, do you?
No, I played well in 93. Hey, listen, we lost to a team that won 6 championships.
Yeah.
You know, we lost to, you know, I had a couple good looks at it. You know, we lost to the champs 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted. The only regret that I have about my career, honestly, I wish I had left Philadelphia sooner because I played there for 8 years, and I was a much better player in Philadelphia than I was in Phoenix. You know, I wish I could have got a couple more looks at it when I was younger, but I got 3 great looks at it. The Bulls were better than us. You said earlier, we weren't better than the Rockets. The Rockets won back-to-back championships. I don't think you can win back-to-back championships as a fluke. So they didn't just beat us; they beat everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess the core question though is do you think it's a valid criticism then to say to a player that his career missed something because he didn't win a championship? You being in that class.
No, I don't think it's a valid criticism. For the simple fact is, they only say that if you're a really great player.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They never said that to. They never said that to a guy who can't play.
Right.
First of all, when you look at the list, you're like, wow, I'm on the list. People think I was a great player. So
yeah.
It's a backhanded compliment to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, will you tell the story about...
I did the best I could, but I got to tell you, I'm watching Stanley Cup finals. I'm watching the World Series. I'm watching the NFL playoffs, and I already know every year the list is going to come up.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I kind of laugh. I go, the list getting ready to come up. So, I'm watching TV the other day, and they're like, well, Dirk ain't never won it. He's on the list with Barkley, Karl Malone, and Patrick Ewing. I'm like, yeah. I know that's going to come up every year. And LeBron's going to be on that list until he wins it.
What was the game?
That's just how it is.
What was the game in the 93 finals when you felt like you had played the best you could possibly play, and Jordan's best was like just a smidge better, and they barely won, and you walked away from that game going?
That's a great question. I'd always thought that I was the best player, to be honest with you, because when I went back to Philadelphia, and, we did a thing in Philadelphia last summer. They got a Comcast, and they were showing, like, greatest games ever and things like that. And they showed me against the Bulls in the mid-'80s. And we had beaten the Bulls, 8 straight times.
Yeah.
So I was like, I always thought, Michael Jordan, when he started winning, he just had more help than me. So when I finally came to Phoenix, because I had told the late, great Cotton Fitzsimmons, I said, hey, dude, I'm the best basketball player in the world. We're going to the finals. He said, that's why I traded for you. I actually thought I was the best. I thought that Bird and Magic just had better players. So I said, listen, dude, I'm going to the finals this year. Dan Marlin and Kevin Johnson, that's what I need. We're going to the finals. He says, well, Michael's going to be there. I said, Cotton, I think I'm better than Michael Jordan. He says, well, we will see when you get there. So we actually got nervous before game 1. We struggled. The pressure got to the guys on the team. I played decent, but I think the other guys were nervous. So game 2, I'm talking to my daughter. She said, Dad, are y'all going to win tonight? I said, baby, your dad is the best basketball player in the world. I'm going to dominate the game tonight. And I remember, I think I had 46, 47. I played great. And Michael had 52. And I got home that night, and my daughter was crying. And I said, she said, Dad, y'all lost again. I said, baby, I think Michael Jordan's better than me. She said, Dad, you never said that before. I said, baby, I never felt like that before. I said, I'm not going to give up. And we didn't give up. We went to Chicago and actually won 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
And that was a game, I remember, because we go back to that game, because we won game 3, the triple overtime game. Michael came back that next game, if you remember, he had 55. And we still didn't give up. We won the next game. Then the next game, you know, we left packs open for a 3 when we were up 2. And the only thing I regret about that game was we had a 5-point lead, and we ran 3 plays for me, and the Bulls, man, they doubled me 3 times in a row. And I never got a shot, and it pissed me off. Frank Johnson shot an air ball. Dan Marley shot a ball from the corner to hit the side of the backboard. That's the only thing that ever bothered me about that series, that I couldn't get a shot. Because Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant, Michael and Scottie were the 2 greatest defenders I've ever seen. Horace Grant was terrific. But they're like, Charles, you're not going to shoot the ball. And that's the only thing that ever really bothered me, to be honest with you, about that situation.
Well, I would have thought it would also bother you that Frank Johnson was on the court, not Kevin Johnson. Because, I mean, let's be honest. If KJ plays better in that series, you have a ring.
Frank Johnson played well that year, man. He was great.
Yeah, but it's Kevin Johnson. The guy was one of the top 10 players in the league, and he was coming out in crunch time. And so
no, you know, they might have been in together, to be honest with you. I can't remember that situation, but I just know the Bulls weren't going to let me shoot.
Right. Well, so LeBron and Wade versus Pippen and Jordan athletically, who would you give the edge?
No, they're not as good as those guys.
Right.
They're not.
Who isn't as good?
Michael going to stop Dwayne Wade. Because Scottie Pippen can guard anybody.
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen could guard anybody. If you remember when he shut down Magic Johnson when they played the Lakers for the championship, Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan are the best 2 defenders I've ever seen in my life, period.
I'm with you. LeBron and Wade, they did tap into that a little bit in that Celtics series, I felt like. They were like flying around in a similar way.
They're great players, and they're terrific to watch, and they're both good guys, too.
Oh, all right. Charles Barkley. It was a pleasure to have you on, as always. Enjoy
always,
the rest
my
of the
brother.
playoffs.
You know I love your work. I'll see you somewhere along the way.
I am sure you will. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right, so we successfully tag-teamed the Barkley interview.
Yeah.
It's a little hard on the delay, but I think we pulled it off.
It really is intriguing how much he is still impacted by not having a title.
I know.
I mean, and when he tries to talk about how it isn't defining him, it makes it so clear that it is.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think he's put a lot of thought into it. And part of it, for him specifically, I think, was the timing. As he said, he was unbelievable in 93, and he was a guy who I'm going to go out and play the greatest game I can play tonight, and it should be good enough. And he just happened to go against Jordan, who was this force of nature that we're never going to see again. You know, I feel worse for him than I do for somebody like Patrick Ewing or Karl Malone, who I just feel like they're missing maybe that 0.5% that I think Barkley had. He just had the bad time.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I necessarily feel so bad for him, but I mean, it's interesting how I wonder. I've always speculated this about his relationship in the studio with Kenny Smith, in the sense that Kenny Smith was essentially a role player his whole career.
Yeah.
But has won those titles.
And reminds him of it. And
because of that, it kind of makes them seem as though they are equal in stature.
Yeah.
When it comes to sort of who knows the truth, you know. And I feel like when Webber is there, then he's sort of he's not really on their level because he's neither as good as Barkley or has the title, even though a lot of times his thoughts are more eloquent and more interesting.
Right.
You know? I mean, I think of those 3 guys. Webber's the one I like listening to the most, but he has less authority for these weird, abstract reasons. You know?
Do you think that it almost makes you think about this stuff more if you never won? Or if you won.
Oh, I'm sure he thinks about it more because he didn't. Just when he says that when these lists come up, whenever he's watching a sporting event, I guarantee you, if you're, if you're Kevin McHale and you're watching the NFL playoffs and they're talking about people
you're not thinking, you're
not going like, I'm on the list of people who have succeeded by default. You know,
I didn't mean it that way. I meant like, do you think he thinks about this big picture stuff more than say Kevin McHale would because Kevin McHale won 3 times and doesn't need to think about it?
When you say big picture stuff, what do you mean?
I mean, I wonder if Kevin McHale is watching Dirk. Well, I guess I know the answer to this question. Kevin McHale watches Dirk and doesn't think of the same things that Barkley thinks about. He doesn't identify with him in that way.
Well, also, obviously, Barkley works as an analyst, which means he is constantly in discussions about people's legacy, what their career means.
Well, McHale is a little bit, too.
McHale is, too. Yeah. But I think that the guys who probably... Like, I bet Karl Malone thinks of it considerably less than Barkley does, simply because for Barkley, it's part of his everyday life now, to think about what a career means. I would guess Malone thinks about his career less, about what it means.
Or you talk yourself into a different narrative for your career. Maybe you almost like block it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, it's all on YouTube for Karl Malone.
Well, we've talked about this before. It is always interesting. What about guys who have like the great college career and they are essentially busts at the NBA level or NFL or whatever the case may be? Do they then look at their career as, boy, it was incredible. I had this incredible life that I got to do all of these things.
Yeah.
Or do they focus on it the way a fan typically does, which is, did you reach your potential at the highest level?
Yeah, well, it depends on if somebody made $90 million, maybe that's what they think of first. Like Weber, when we did talk about this before, we were saying how Weber had made like $260 million. Well, you can't be a failure when you've made $260 million. We need a different word. Maybe he didn't reach the potential of what he could have been as a player, but he didn't fail.
So do you think somebody do you think Sidney Moncrief, when he looks at his life, is like, I had this incredible life, or do you think that he is defined by the regrets he has about
his knee,
not winning titles, being injured?
No, I think he thinks about his knee. And I think anybody who had a serious injury and didn't reach their potential, that's just going to be what they think of first.
Probably.
Because Moncrief has to look back and think, I would have been the best two guard other than Jordan of that entire 15-year stretch of basketball.
But, after a degree of time passes, though, then it always seems to improve.
Right.
It's really only in that short window of time when the career is over where these questions, I think, are more...
Well, look at the Kareem stuff. I thought that was fascinating yesterday. Kareem basically had this meltdown on Twitter that he doesn't have a statue, and Magic Johnson got one. And this is somebody that has clearly not been able to come to grips with his place right now compared to what it should be.
He seems dissatisfied. It did seem throughout his entire career, though. He seemed to a degree dissatisfied, so it might just be his personality type. And plus, when, he was... He was one of those guys who was so great that there was never a point in his career where he wasn't being criticized.
Yeah.
He was being criticized in high school, simply because of the level of greatness he achieved. So that would be a weird feeling.
The problem is he wasn't fun to watch. And that was people's problem with him had nothing to do with how great he was. It was always that he's great, but I don't really enjoy watching him.
I don't think that's what it is, Bill. Because
what do you think it is?
I first of all, he was such an effective player and such a great player. I think that people felt that at one point, especially during his time at UCLA, he had this unfair physical advantage. Obviously changing the dunk rule.
That was his high school college.
So even in a way that, at least with somebody like Chamberlain, it seemed like he and Russell were similar. But there was no one like Jabbar in college, and even when Walton came after him, it didn't seem like Walton was as good as Jabbar. So then he, during the 70s, which is this weird period for the NBA anyways, he's by far the most dominant player. It almost seems like they just give him the MVP every year. It's almost meaningless. It's so clear he's the best player. So because of that, and because I think of the way he carried himself to a degree, he didn't seem interested in adulation. I think the fact that he was an intelligent guy.
I totally disagree. And maybe it's just because I've read Giant Steps. Have you read Giant Steps?
Yes.
He seemed bitter. And the two things that seemed to make him bitter was, one, that...
Well, that's what I mean, the way he carried himself.
But everyone talked in the late 70s, the NBA is going to hell. It's going, this league's falling apart. The Raiders are going down. The stars aren't likable. He was the biggest star.
By far.
So that was all an indictment of him.
It's
kind of indirectly people saying it's your fault. You're the best player and nobody likes the league. And then the other thing, when Magic showed up, everybody made such a big deal about, Magic, he loosened up Kareem. And it feels like, especially when you read Giant Steps, Kareem was like insulted by that. I didn't need Magic Johnson to start, but I was always good. I was good well before Magic Johnson.
Well, and that's true, though.
It is very true.
You bring up a good point, though, that the perception of the NBA in the late 70s was so negative, and he was so much the face of the league.
Yeah.
It was almost like he absorbed all those criticisms. The fact that in the movie Airplane, they make jokes about him not playing defense during the season, that is really a reflection of what was the main thing people thought about the NBA at the time, which is that there was a lot of cocaine, and that guys didn't play defense, especially during the year. So it is an interesting problem. But he was, when you read about him as a college player, he seemed pretty distant and aloof. He didn't like being tall. That's another thing. Guys who are big, physically big, if they don't seem to appreciate sort of the gift of size, people really hate that about them. People didn't like that about Ralph Sampson, which is something I've written about. The idea that somehow that you're not comfortable with what a lot of other people see as this incredible gift.
Ralph never wanted it. He wanted to be a guard.
Yeah.
I felt like Kareem at least embraced it with the skyhook. He was like, I'm going to use my height for this shot, and nobody will ever be able to block it at any point in their life.
I'll tell you what, is there anything weirder than that's the most effective shot in the history of the league?
Ever.
And why has no one attempted to replicate that? I'll never understand that. Why didn't Sean Bradley try to develop that shot? Why didn't any sort of undersized but tall post player develop that shot? It's totally doable, and it's completely unstoppable. In a way, it sort of makes the argument that Kareem was potentially the greatest offensive weapon ever.
Well, think about this.
In the fact that what he did, what his whole game was built around, was something that no one has been able to replicate.
Think about this. He's 41 years old. He's basically washed up. He's got Magic Johnson on his team in his prime. Game 6, 1988 finals. They're down 1. They need a basket. They come out of a timeout. They run the play for that skyhook. And he's washed up at that point. And he got fouled. He made the 2 free throws.
Yeah, well, it's the most effective basketball set offensive play that there's ever been.
And it is weird. But then when you watch the skyhook, I don't know how you would replicate it. I don't know how he did that so perfectly. It's almost like watching a crane.
Well, and at some point, though, there was this wide-scale move to the jump hook, which now everybody shoots. This kind of happened, I felt, in the late 80s.
Which you bring your arm up and you just fire it.
Yes, and it's just all your wrist, where the skyhook is the whole body. But
well, and also you're using your left arm to basically close arm the guy away from you, or clothesline the guy a little bit. You're creating the space. That's what made it unblockable.
But it's different now because I guess so much time has passed. But I remember you would meet a guy in his 50s sometimes, and he could still throw in a hook shot. That was a very central part of learning how to play basketball in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s.
Yeah, it's true. And the round hook shot,
and
the Tommy Heinsohn shot.
And they just, or even just, because I guess Kareem's was more straight up. It was all wrist, But like that shot he hit one with the Bucks against the Celtics in the 70s, that's like
it was like a 20-foot skyhook.
19-foot skyhook. And here's something I was going to ask you.
Wait, hold on. I got one more thing on this. Because you look at the turnaround that Jordan used to make, which he worked at really hard, and basically he would shoot it at a 45-degree angle. Dirk Nowitzki, same thing. He's got that one-leg shot now where he's basically bent and can make it. Hakeem had the dream shake.
Bird had the step back. There were a lot of,
Well, but I mean, I think those 3 shots, the Hakeem, the Dirk, and the Jordan, I don't know how those guys do that shot. It seems like we should figure out how Kareem did that skyhook. It seems like that would be more replicable than Dirk shooting off one leg, falling backwards.
I feel like Jabbar would teach it to anybody who actually wanted to learn, but they'd have to work through these like Bill Wooden principles.
Well, they'd have to hang out with Jabbar. I think is the downside. Like in a year, Andrew Bynum stopped talking to him. So what were we going to say?
Also, first of all, I said Bill Wooden. John Wooden. That was a weird thing to say.
Bill Wooden was his bastard brother.
Wasn't it? Okay. Let's say we were having a 2-on-2 tournament, and it's got to be someone who's in your family. Okay. So the Gasol brothers are the obvious favorite, right?
Okay.
Seemingly unbeatable.
Yeah.
Who's the next best team?
For brothers?
You can use your dad, I guess, or your sister if you want. Immediate family, 2-on-2 tournament. The Gasols are the 1 seed. Who's the team? The Curry brothers?
All time? Or right now, 2011?
Right now or all time. I guess all time, the Wilkins brothers would be in there. Gerald and Dominique.
Horace and Harvey Grant.
Very similar games, though.
The Van Arsdale twins. I mean, the Gasols would be, I think, ridiculous.
Currys would be good now.
Stephen and who's the other one? The one from Duke?
Yeah.
Seth Curry?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be able to beat the Gasols.
They wouldn't be able. I can't see anybody beating the Gasols.
Oh, it is amazing.
They're probably
to me the craziest story of the year was that Marc Gasol single-handedly vindicated that trade.
Yes,
which was the worst trade of the decade, and now isn't, because Marc Gasol is going to get paid like $70 million.
Although people went a little overboard when everyone was saying, like, oh, in 3 years I know which Gasol I would like. In 3 years, Pau Gasol's still going to be pretty good.
Yes.
I mean, I think that now it's a lot of times when Marc Gasol does something great, what he's really doing is something that Pau Gasol does all the time,
right.
Like make a really deft pass or, it also step a little farther out than you'd think. Or.
With Marc Gasol, it worries me a little. Like, he lost 50 pounds. And it's a little like if you have the friend who marries the girl who used to be heavy, but now she got skinny for the wedding, and you're like, it's going to be... it's a little tough to keep that weight off. I don't know if Mark has that weight off once he gets that contract.
Did Jordan have a brother?
Jordan did not have a brother.
No brothers.
He supposedly had this 5'9", crazy older brother, like crazy good older brother who was like a Spud Webb type.
See, Jordan and any brother would have been good. Larry Bird and his brother Joe Bird have been probably pretty good.
I've always had a theory on this. Like, it's always going to be the younger brother who's the best one.
Well, yes.
Because you need to have the guy who's trying to play with the older brothers all the time when he's like 5, 6, 7.
Especially in basketball when they can really play each other. Like in football, a lot of times the best, like in the Mannings, the middle kid is obviously the best.
Yeah.
But in basketball, you can play one-on-one against your older brother and get better real fast.
Yeah, if you want to have a stud athlete, you want to have at least 2 boys, and it's going to be the second boy.
How would have Reggie Miller and Cheryl Miller fared in this tournament?
Yeah, I was going to say they'd be in the top 5.
Yeah.
They'd be pretty good, right?
I don't know if they'd be top 5, but they'd be good, yeah.
Yeah, Reggie, they could go a little inside-outside. Cheryl was the best women's player ever. I mean, I think that's still the case.
Now, the last time we did a podcast, you were like, Maya Moore is the greatest female basketball player ever. Different level. She could play in the CBA.
Why? Didn't I say greatest scorer?
No, when we were talking about UConn.
Well, I was saying I thought the way she played could translate to the best. I still think I'm right on that whole thing.
I do not.
How crazy David Kahn is. You're telling me he wouldn't have Maya Moore as his 12th man just to sell tickets? It's a lunatic.
The thing about the Millers, though, there's some story I heard about this where Cheryl was talking about this. It was surprising how early in their career her brother flew past her, though. Like, they were playing one-on-one, and she used to always kick his ass. And one day, like, he's in 6th grade or 7th grade, and she blows by him, and he pinned the ball against the backboard.
Right.
And then she was like, let's play horse from now on. Yeah.
Right.
And I always think Reggie Miller is such a good sport about that, because he must have got so much he must have been just teased and hazed continually about his sister being better than him.
It did last a while.
And he really seems like he's makes jokes about it. He seems really cool about it, you know?
Yeah.
I guess it's not the worst thing to be teased about, but
no. So what's your prediction? Did you have a prediction for the Final Four here?
For the in the NBA playoffs?
Yeah.
I think Chicago is going to win. I think Dallas is going to win.
It seems like the Chicago-Miami is just going to be you win, we win, you win, we win, you win, we win. Then it goes to game 7.
I mean, Barkley was like, Chicago's got to win one of these 2 games in Miami. Obviously, yes, that is true. They can't get down 3-1.
Well, his point was like, if we're now at must win. And what he was saying about there's 2 games in a series, I thought was a really good point, because I've always felt like you're watching a series and you never know when it's going to happen with the game, but you know it as it's happening. And it was that case with Memphis OKC when it went into 3 overtimes. There came a point in that game where you're like, whoever wins this game is going to win the series. Like, that's it. It almost started to feel like a game 7.
That game was great because you could tell the teams did know something was at stake, and they were very conscious of it.
Yeah.
They just knew that. I mean, and it did seem clear if Memphis won that game, they'd be up 3-1. There's no way that they could come back from that. I suppose Memphis did think in a way, well, even if we lose this game, we just got to go 2 out of 3, but it didn't feel that way.
Yeah, they could have slammed the door.
Because I don't think they thought they could win Game 7 in Oklahoma.
Because when Conley made that 3 and kept them alive, and then you're like, wow, this is going to be it for Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. And then they somehow fought back. You're not watching the hockey at all, right?
No, I am not.
Do you not care about hockey?
I guess I don't know. If I did, I'd be watching it.
Did you care at any point about hockey, or you've never cared?
I cared about the WCHA when I was in college. Still a little interested in college hockey, but not so much that I watch it. I just kind of follow it on the internet.
I really enjoy the hockey playoffs, and the last 4 years I've trickled back. I fell out for a variety of reasons, mainly because they weren't doing a good job of making the sport entertaining. And I think, it's HD has helped hockey the most out of any sport because you can see the puck now all the time, and that wasn't always the case.
Are there certain things that you're interested in following and you don't simply because there's just too much now? I mean, I feel that way sometimes. Like,
Yeah,
what is your
college hoops is like that for me.
So you'll follow the NHL, but you won't follow college basketball.
No, I like the NHL playoffs.
Okay, so you just sort of pick up when it starts going.
Yeah,
down.
it's a 2-month sport for me.
Yeah.
And although I did watch more Bruins regular season than I thought because they had this rookie that I liked, and I found myself flipping over if there's nothing else on. I follow them pretty good for me. For the most I followed them probably in 18 years this year.
Well, I see you tweet about them once in a while.
Yeah,
and
college hoops to me it's so, you need to watch 4 weeks and you're good. It's the 1 year I got into it was the Durant Oden year, and that was a year they had real star power.
But it's interesting when you make that argument because I think that there's people who love hockey who just heard you say, I start watching the playoffs.
Oh, they probably get mad.
Well, I don't know if they get mad, but they probably don't take you seriously as someone who knows about hockey.
Yeah,
so to say that you only watch college basketball for 4 weeks, I feel like then that's part of the reason why you like it less. I think you'd like it more if you watched more of it.
Yeah, but when I watch it, because I love the NBA so much, to me, the skill level is too dramatically different. That's what kills me. We've already argued about this. I know,
but here I have this is a semi-related question. Okay, you're watching the NBA playoffs. I'm watching the NBA playoffs. These games are fantastic. They're incredible. I mean, I look forward every night knowing that there's probably going to be a good basketball game at night. But part of me is irritated by the level that's different between the playoffs and the regular season. It makes me sort of feel duped for watching anything in the regular season.
Well, the NHL is a much bigger example.
It might be. But, I mean, in the NFL, the gap isn't that great. The playoffs are better.
Well, that's because they only play once a week. And this is the argument for the Premier League in English soccer, is that because there's so few games, every game is a playoff game, basically, and that's why everybody loves that format so much.
I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. My favorite player to watch in the playoffs thus far has been Zach Randolph. I think it's been really great to see him, but part of me thinks this really reflects badly on him. The fact that he can be so great now that he, quote-unquote, cares. And yet, during the year, he had a great statistical year. So I guess he would argue it's like I was playing like this all season. When I looked at his numbers, I didn't watch Memphis a lot. They weren't on that much. But I mean, he had an insane fantasy year.
Yeah. By the way, that wasn't one of the 5 worst things that he's been judged for.
Well, but I'm just saying, it just seems weird to me when I watch him play and he's so great. It does seem like 5 months are just sort of a play. It's like almost like a scripted play. They're just kind of shaking things out, playing hard for 7 minutes a night just to get to this point. It almost makes me think, let's just have the whole season be a long tournament then. I mean, Well,
that's basically that. I mean, that's the beauty of the hockey playoffs. You know what else I like about hockey? I've written this before, but in 2011, like with what's happened with the NBA the last 20 years, where you're just not allowed to stand up for yourself at all. The players aren't allowed to control their surroundings, anybody else's conduct. You can't stand up for a teammate. If somebody crosses the line, the players aren't trusted to handle it. In hockey, they still are. And that's what as the more and more hockey I watch, like, I really like that. Hey, that guy that guy shouldn't have done that to our goal. I'm going to go over and cross-check him in the head. And they have a scrum and they settle it, and then everybody just moves on. There's more of a dignity to it, I think.
Have you read a book about hockey called The Code?
No.
There's this book a guy wrote several years ago, and the writing in the book it's pretty straight. Like no one's going to think this dude is Faulkner or anything, but he gets great information about sort of the inside culture, like goon culture in the NHL, and it was much more complicated, I guess, than I realized.
Oh yeah,
and that has you feel like that's sort of been unaffected by the evolution of the game.
Not only unaffected, but I feel like they went for a while. They kind of went away from it, and now they've embraced it. And probably the smartest thing Gary Bettman did is he realized this is part of the identity, and that it's also like that Canadian hockey culture where you can leave it on the ice. You can do something horrible to somebody, and they'll do something horrible back, and then it's fine the next day. I don't know if the NBA works like that.
Well, since you often kind of see yourself as in a position of power in the NBA, most you could have been. You imagine yourself as commissioner. You imagine yourself as GM sometimes. Just kind of hypothetically.
Yeah, I don't think it could have worked. But.
So, no, I'm not saying for real, but like you think a lot about the administrative and executive issues that the NBA has.
Right.
Okay, so I see like in mixed martial arts now, they're actually rewarding participants for tweeting.
Yeah.
So now, what policy do you think is better? A league that decides we're going to use these social media things as an avenue. We're going to actually try to get these guys to be more interesting and more communicative. Or do you think it's better off for the health of a league to control that? Do you think that it makes sense for David Stern to stop people from twittering certain ideas and certain messages?
Well, I think they've embraced it. They don't want them to Twitter things that are offensive or things that hurt the credibility of the league, but I think for the most part they're encouraging the guys to be who they are, and I think that's one of the reasons why the sport has really seemed to
But you can't do
take
both,
strides.
You can't say that we're really encouraging these guys to be who they are, but there are some limitations. I feel it's kind of got to be an all-or-nothing proposition.
Well, there are limitations, though. Let's say the Suns GM comes out of the closet on a Sunday, everybody writes about it on Monday. Let's say one of the players made a gay joke about him on Tuesday. That's something you deal with, I think.
So that's something the Suns deal with, or something the league deals with?
That's something the league deals with. That's not. That's
how do you deal with it? Because if you
fine the guy a lot of money.
So but do you still have the mandate that we want you to be yourself and we want you to do this?
You want to be yourself, but you also want to maintain a certain level of human decency.
Do you fine a guy if he says that when addressed a question by a beat reporter? If a beat reporter were to
says,
ask,
"How do you feel?"
Yes.
Well, I think the Luke Scott thing's a good example of how that played out. Luke Scott had the whole birther thing, and he really played that up. And whether you agreed with it or not, it was how he felt. And it's America, and you're supposed to have freedom of speech. I don't feel like he should have been fined.
That's why in that Mendenhall situation, I think is even
another one. He should have been
because
fined.
Here's the deal. Everyone hammered him for twittering this stuff, which began as, say, just a little odd. When he gets into the stuff about the towers not falling, that is kind of, or not, being detonated or whatever, that's kind of weird. But here's the thing. Let's say that the news of Bin Laden's death was on a Sunday night. Okay, so let's say that happens on a Sunday night during the season when the Steelers are playing. It's the biggest news. There obviously would have been a point in the game when the crowd would have chanted USA or whatever. It would have been something reporters would have asked guys about in the locker room after the game.
Right.
So if he says those exact same things to a reporter from USA Today, is that less problematic than the idea that he had his own agency and did it on his own? Because I can't imagine the NFL being like, we need to step into this. This guy has problematic views. But somehow, it is weird. It's like you can say anything if you're answering a question, but you can't say anything interesting if it's on your own.
I don't think he did anything wrong. I just think he said something that most people are going to disagree with.
I agree.
And you could argue it was stupid,
yes.
But I have a real problem.
So, but you make it makes sense for you that the NBA would fine a guy for saying something homophobic, but you would be very against the idea of someone saying something that could be viewed as unpatriotic.
If someone has a stupid view or whatever that you're probably not going to agree with, but I think it's just a little different than gay bashing somebody.
Yeah, okay. So what's the cutoff? Well, I'm just curious. I'm not trying to say
the cutoff for me is
if a guy says something about race that's questionable.
Yeah, I would say race or sexual preference or.
But does it have to be an epithet, or can it be just something controversial? Okay.
Wait a second. I think the Mendenhall thing's a really good test case. That's something that offended a lot of people, and especially if I was a family member of one of the 9/11 victims and I read that, I would get upset.
Okay.
But I don't think that he crossed a line. I just think he had, he was boneheaded.
Okay.
But that's what he believes, and this is America, and you should be able to say what you believe, in a way that just people don't just make you a pariah.
Well, I know, but you kind of keep going back and forth on this because you are saying that if something is offensive, that you feel that it's okay for David Stern to step in and find someone for tweeting.
It's degrees of offensive, though.
Okay, so really, it's a total judgment call.
I think it is.
No line.
I think it's a judgment call.
But
that's part of what is being the commissioner.
Yes.
And stuff.
Okay. That's probably.
What Mendenhall said, you just kind of go, why'd you have to? You shouldn't say that. But I guess we have to decide what this country is. Are we allowed to say anything? Is he allowed? If he really honestly believes that, should he be allowed to believe that?
It's not really a question about, as an American, because as an American, yes, he absolutely can. The question becomes is if you are part of a corporate entity, do they have a say in how you express yourself? And that's essentially what the NFL is. The NFL is really one big business with, every team operates as its own business, but really, you can have collusion in the NFL or in the NBA the way you couldn't in anything. So the question becomes is once you sign a contract, is there also a kind of a social contract within that reality that they can, to a degree, dictate what your personality is?
I kind of think there is.
Okay.
Is dictate the right word, though?
What if a boxer did it? Could the administrative function...
I think boxers have done it.
Well, okay, yeah.
It's a blurry line.
So,
that's, I guess, what a commissioner would do. And I think David Stern would admit this is a part of his job that he never thought he would have to deal with. Because for years and years, players were only in a controlled thing with the microphones hanging in front of them. And pretty much everything they said was in an airtight environment that they could control to some degree. And now they have no control whatsoever. I don't think we've scratched the surface yet with Twitter, with professional athletes. And to be honest, I'm stunned that the Rashard Mendenhall thing hasn't happened 3 times a week. Because you have an open forum now where athletes can just type and a thought goes up, and that's it. Once it posts, that's it. Mm-hmm. There's a record of it. People see it. And you would think that, how many professional athletes and college athletes do we have now? Like 5,000-6,000?
I don't know.
Of high profile? I don't even know what the number is. For professional athletes... I'm trying to think, we got more than that. It's tens of thousands. So you would just think this would happen more often. You'd think somebody when they're drunk would do some tweet, or somebody when they're stoned, or somebody when they're really angry at their coach, they just post some horrible thing. And yet it rarely happens.
I guess, it's true. And we're not, we were talking about athletes now, but just with public figures in general, I guess it does happen a little less often than logic would seem to indicate, because
a lot less often, I would think.
Yeah. But in a way, that's I think why a situation like Rashard Mendenhall becomes a bigger deal, because there must be some unconscious understanding that there is a difference between answering a reporter's question and doing it on your own, and that as a society we've somehow come to accept these rules kind of organically. Like almost immediately after Twitter sort of became popular, there became an understanding that it was something very different between what you would say at a party and what you would say on Twitter, even though the creators of Twitter would argue that that's what they're trying to create, a world that is like a party, a global party. But people don't treat it that way.
Did you like Mendenhall less after that series of tweets?
No, I have to say that I didn't like him more, but I definitely found him more intriguing than I had when he played at Illinois or with the Steelers. I guess I just always saw him as kind of a decent running back who's a good receiver. I never ever thought of him in any other way.
But you can understand that some people would like him less after those tweets.
Yeah, I guess I can understand that because I know that's how people are. I think I'm not the type of person who is very impacted by someone's politics in regard to how much I like them. I've always been extremely comfortable around people who are very far to the right and very far to the left. It is never, especially living in New York, that's a complex thing because, it's a very sort of liberal community where that's a big part of people's identity, and I think that they often see other people through the lens of their politics. But I don't really like that. So the fact that Mendenhall did this, I guess it just, if it really was craven and his impact was just to get attention, it did work. I think about him more. I can't imagine that we would be talking about Rashard Mendenhall today. if I don't know what else he could have done in his life that would have created us to bring him up.
It is interesting. It did make him more intriguing. It made him also a lot less likable, and I do think to some people, and I do think one of the things I don't like about this whole thing is it seems like, especially in the blogosphere, people sit around and they wait for Rashard Mendenhall, whoever the next thing is, to say something dumb. And everybody and then you get your the blog posts, you get the pious blog posts, and everybody, it's like a free column for people or a free blog post or whatever to just attack whoever said the next dumb thing.
Well, the thing that drives me nuts is like this thing about Khan you mentioned, okay? Khan makes a joke about the kid having cancer, like there was some sort of...
and it was clearly... He shouldn't have said it, but if you heard the audio tape, it was in jest.
He was obviously joking, and the thing that I find most hypocritical is that the kind of person who attacks him for doing that tends to be the same kind of person who would make that joke if he had not.
Right.
They tend to be people who sort of are very interested in anything that happens in the media, and that's a pretty obvious joke to make if you follow the NBA and you follow sort of its history of lottery conspiracies.
But read in print, it didn't feel right.
You know, he gets hammered for this joke that it's acceptable for someone talking about the lottery to do. And I see that a lot. I often see that people are hammered for things that are questionable, but more questionable when you think about what kind of jokes the source typically makes if that person does not.
Well, it does seem like we're trying to create this artificial universe that's a parallel universe to the one we actually live in where, you know, let's say I'm at an Easter dinner with 20 people in my family. What are the odds that one of the people at the table will say something on the level of what Richard Mendenhall said in those tweets? They're pretty high. You're going to have a loose cannon at the table, and it's not like people are, oh, you have to leave. That's a terrible, you know, and it's like, it happens. People say crazy things. They have weird opinions. Everybody's family is weird. I don't know a single person who doesn't have a weird family to some degree. You have characters.
I suppose the counter argument would be, though, that Richard Mendenhall can look at his Twitter account and see how many people are reading it. So if he looks at it, and I have no idea what it is, I'm sure it's 200 and some thousand or 1 million or some big number. Okay, it's got to be, right? Well, it would be. I can't really estimate it. I'm sure it's a big number, and he's aware of that. So if it's at an Easter dinner, and there were 350,000 people at your house, and for whatever reason the guy making that comments is doing it on a loudspeaker, that would be different. That would be very different than this. This is like the consciousness thing, because even a guy talking in the locker room to a beat reporter, in all likelihood, that guy is going to write a story that no one reads.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something on Twitter, the one thing you know is that this is a captive audience who consciously wants to see my thoughts. They would not follow me if they didn't, you know. Yeah. So when he says something like that, he obviously, I mean, the argument that he didn't really know what he was doing, I don't really believe that. I think he did know what he was doing. The real question is what he was doing so problematic, or actually is it the kind of thing we are always pushing athletes to do, which is be interesting and be themselves in public?
Last thing, and then we'll go. An NBA player comes out next month, Joe Schmo in the New Jersey Nets. What's the reaction, first of all, general public, media, and then the Nets?
I would say that the media perception would definitely be against Outlaw. I think that there would be...
They call him a homophobe, he discriminates.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily... like the guys on like the TV shows and the columnists might actually say that, but I just think the general take from the media would be that this is a pretty immature, unprogressive idea. I think that there would be a certain element of the populace who would... whose sort of fears about gay people could then sort of be shared with him, and he would become a fan favorite among the homophobic aspect of the NBA.
What if he played the whole religious card full tilt, and he's like, look, I'm a devout religious, and it says this here, and I don't like this, and he just went the whole 9 yards with the little religious thing. And he's like, this is fine, he can play in the team, but I just want another team. I have the right to ask to play for another team.
Well, I think that a lot of the reaction would be from people who think he's crazy would be like, the Nets should trade him. And there would be some question about whatever team takes him. They would be like, okay, let's say that they work out a deal with the Thunder. I think that there would be some people who would be like,
then they'd look down on the Thunder.
Is this what the Thunder want to do?
You're trading for a gay basher.
Because they would essentially be saying, you're taking somebody who can help your team in the short term over a culture of sort of our kind of archaic negativity.
See, I think the Nets would have to release him, and I think he'd become a pariah.
Interestingly, I think it would be handled differently in football. I think to the audience for the NFL, they would almost be more understanding of that position because it's a physical game, and I think it would be. I do think it would be much easier for basketball or a baseball player to come out than a football player. I think the culture of that sport is different.
Tennis would be the easiest.
Well, yes.
You're by yourself.
Or golf or anything.
Yeah, tennis or golf would be the two. Even tennis would be easier than golf.
Yeah.
You're just playing against one other person every time.
I mean, it is interesting. I mean, how many years before you think it happens?
Oh, I think in the next 18 months.
In the next 18 months?
I do.
Okay, this is so it's what, May?
I thought that before Rick Welts.
Yeah. So by the end of 2012.
Yes.
By Christmas of 2012.
Absolutely.
A athlete.
The question will be whether that person is outed or whether he chooses to come out. But that person will come out, and we will know that person's name by the end of 2012. It's going to happen.
It's possible.
It's going to happen.
I don't know.
It should happen, and I think it's going to be
Why
really
that
important.
time frame? Why 18 months?
We're ready. It's everything that's happened has been a baby step to the next thing. And you go back to T.R. Knight and Isaiah Washington and that whole thing, and Neil Patrick Harris, and you go on down the line. This whole decade has been a series of baby steps. The gay marriage debate, everything has been building toward this moment.
Well, really, the whole 90s were too. I mean, if you're in 1990, if you had a move, like I think like in some of those, someone brought this up to me, like in those Crocodile Dundee movies, there's these incredible kind of homophobic messages from the perspective of the protagonist.
Right.
Like you're supposed to like this character and he hates gay people or whatever, And by 1999, it's pretty hard to imagine a movie like that where the heroic figure is also homophobic. That just changed in a very fast window of time. Or like when you look at, say, the first Beastie Boys record compared to the band the Beastie Boys became 10 years later, and that seemed to sort of be in step with how a teen audience would respond to ideas about culture.
Right. Well, the thing with when was Philadelphia? 1993?
I think.
You watched that movie recently?
No.
It's super dated.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it's like gay's bad. There's scenes with Denzel Washington. The basic theme in the movie is that actually gay people aren't that bad. And it's really kind of insulting if you watch it pretty carefully. And there's scenes with Denzel Washington. It's basically about Denzel Washington coming to grips with his own homophobia and realizing that gay people are people too. Which is not a movie that would get made in 2011. I think we've crossed that line, but it's just, you think like the Melrose Place, they wouldn't let the two guys kiss. They had to cut away, and the stuff with Magic. And I mean, it definitely, the 90s were the first part. This decade now has been about people coming out with no repercussions. And if anything, it made them get respected more, which is, coming back to the argument, that's why I feel like with athletes, somebody's going to do it. And I think it's going to be somebody in their early 30s who's at maybe the last third of their career, who's smart, who really sees the big picture, and kind of like what Rick Welts did. Rick Welts came out partly because he wanted to help other people who were younger, who maybe wanted to get into sports or whatever. He felt like he could be a role model to those people. And that was really one of the reasons he did it. I think it's going to be the same thing for an athlete. That guy's going to see the big picture. And that'll be it. Joe Meade, we're done. Chuck Klosterman, thanks for hanging out with us for the last 2 days. It was fun.
It was fun being here in California.
We will see your work on Grantland.com in a couple weeks. Looking forward to it.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.